We continue. Devil worship in France. R. The question of Lucifer, a record of things seen and heard in the secret societies, according to the evidence of initiates. 1896 of the vulgar era. We continue with The Devil and the Doctor, which is chapter 7. Honored with her acquaintance. For a considerable period, the Doctor invariably testifies the utmost respect for this wealthy, beautiful, and high-placed Palladian lady, so long protected by a demon of the superior hierarchy and enjoying what he somewhat obscurely terms an obsessional guardianship. And, there's 4 reasons to marry. Most are going to just look at the body, and they're not going to fall in love for that. They're not going to fall in love with the status. They're not going to fall in love with the wealth. You can fall in love with the character. All these other things will fade, but you can think you're in love. You definitely can love wealth and status and the body, but we'll find out. We'll judge this situation more after hearing more about it, won't we? On the 28th of February, 1884, at a theurgic seance of Templar Mistress and elect Magi of Louisville, the ceiling of the temple was riven suddenly, and Asmodeus, genius of fire, descended to slow music, having in one hand a sword, and in the other the long tail of a lion. He informed the company that there had just been a great battle between the leaders of Lucifer and Adonai, and that it had been his personal felicity to lop off the lion's tail of St. Mark. He directed the members of the 11+7 triangle to preserve the trophy carefully, and that it might not be a lifeless relic. He had thoughtfully informed it with one of his minor devils until such time as he himself should intervene to mark his omnipotent favor towards a certain predestined virgin. The Vestal in question was Diana of the Charlestonians, elect sister, and Asmodeus, who at that time was not affiliated to Palladism. When the Doctor subsequently drew her on the subject of this history, she replied after the manner of the walrus, "Do you admire the view?" For himself, the good Doctor dislikes the narrative, not because it does violence to possibility, but because it did violence to St. Mark. There's evidently an incomplete dignity about a tailless evangelist, and to the tale itself he has no personal doubt that it was the property of an ordinary lion, and that it has since become possessed of a devil. Now, yes, they're magical tools derived from animal parts, but, the tails and the horns of the so-called saints, aren't these the preferred forms of demons? Oh, well, not when it refers to the saints. Then how can you tell the saints apart from the demons? And where in the Bible does it say that the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they had... Okay, it does say that about Moses, that he had horns, but that's kind of an ambiguous passage linguistically. Generations, he could have had children. He could have worn a crown. It's not quite necessarily the same thing, but although there's symbolic elements, and maybe people did have horn, so if Moses had horns, the Christian gospel writers had to have horns and tails and stuff too. Well, lions don't have horns, but I'm rambling. At the risk of offending Mrs. Vaughn, the Doctor expedites her case and learnedly demonstrates that her possession is of so uninterrupted a kind that it has become a second nature and belongs to the fifth degree. However this may be, he establishes at great length one important point in her favor, which has occasioned all French Catholics to earnestly desire her conversion. I have stated already that the grade of Templar mistress is concerned partially with profanations of the Eucharist. For example, the aspirant to this initiation is required to drive a stiletto into the consecrated host, with becoming expressions of fury. When Mrs. Vaughan visited Paris in the year 1885, where Miss Walder had some time previously established herself, she was invited to enter this grade, and accepted the offer. A seance for initiation was held accordingly, but Miss Vaughan would have none of profanation, and refused blankly to stultify her liberal intelligence by the stabbing of a wheaten wafer. She did not believe in the real presence, and she did not wish to be childish. Say it's only the Catholic real, well, other churches, I guess, have adapted this pre-Christian idea that it really becomes the God. And a great sensation followed. Her initiation was postponed. Appeal was made to Charleston, and that formality was dispensed with in her case by the intervention, as it was supposed at the moment, of Albert Pike's authority, even as her father's intervention had excused her beforehand from another ordeal which could not be suffered with propriety. This episode implanted in the breast of Sophia Walder an extreme form of Palladian hatred for the Diana of the Philalethe's. Now Sophia was in high favor with all the host of perdition, yet her rancorous relations with her sister adept did not make Diana less a persona grata to the peculiar intelligence which governs the descending hierarchy. In the Mammoth Cave of Kentucky, the Palladian Magi and the Mistress Templars decided one day to have a little experiment with the Undines, so they shouldered their magical instruments, but the eager elementaries, habiting the dark abysses, did not wait to be evoked. The water bubbled in the lake. The roof was constellated with stars. And who should appear but Asmodeus on the bank opposite in all his infernal glory. With open arms, he loudly called on Diana, and that lady, suddenly transfigured, walked calmly over the water and kissed the feet of her demon, who, incontinently vanished. Inspired by a sense of deficiency, the doctor says that the visit to Mammoth Cave terminated without any further incident. He was not an ocular witness of what he relates in this instance, but he received it from the lips of Diana, and the lips of Diana, in the opinion of all honorable men, would be preferable to the eyes of the doctor. But the doctor had the testimony of his eyes upon another occasion. It is known that Mrs. Vaughan's celebrity began with her hostility to the Italian Grand Master, Adriano Lemmi, when the seat of the sovereign pontificate, as deponents testify, was removed from Charleston, the great city of Lucifer, even unto the eternal city, and many adepts commissioned. There was a doubt in the real camp to the continued protection of Lucifer. If Diabolos had gone over to Lemmy, they were indeed bereft. Miss Vaughan, however, remained calm and sanguine. I am certain of the celestial protection of the genii of light, said Diana, and, producing her talisman, she bent her right knee to the ground, turned a complete somersault without falling flung her tambourine into the air, which descended gently and remained suspended a yard from the ground, while she herself, passing into a condition of ecstasy, also arose into the air in a recumbent posture. She remained in this state for the space of 15 minutes, the silence being only broken by the distant rumbling of thunder. Many of the spectators could not believe their eyes. At length, very gently, her body assumed a vertical position, head downwards, but, as a concession to polite feeling, the remaining laws of gravity were suspended, like herself, and her skirts were not correspondingly inverted. Slowly, the ecstatic lady continued to circulate. The assembly stood at gaze, like Joshua's moon and the Jalon, and presently she was in the vertical position of a swimmer, the phenomenon concluding by her restoration to terra firma. This wonder was accomplished by the magic power of a diabolical rose, which the lady carried in her bodice. Now, so, the good doctor's denying, yes, yes, when she did somersaults and all that, we didn't see up her dress. No, no, other thing. It was magical, but we didn't see up her dress. No, none of that. On yet another occasion, the doctor witnessed the prodigy of the bilocation of Diana by the assistance of a simple magical process, when, to his most certain knowledge, she was hundreds of leagues away. But the recitations of Dr. Bataille have reduced bilocation to a banality, and a mere reference will suffice. A monograph of Miss Vaughan's miracles would, however, be incomplete if it failed to exhibit her and her capacity as a breaker of spells. Whatsoever has been bound by devildom can be loosed by Diana. At the height of the commotion occasioned by her persistent refusal to participate in sham sacrilege, there was one member of the Paris Triangle who manifested peculiar acrimony in demanding the expulsion of a delinquent who had dared to impeach the ritual. As a punishment for his own presumption, in the presence of the assembled adepts, his head was suddenly reversed by an unseen power, and for the space of 21 days he was obliged to review the situation face backwards. This severe judgment dismayed all present. Miss Walter had recourse to an evocation, and discovered that it had been inflicted by Asmodeus, the protector of her rival, who furthermore would not scruple to visit with violent disaster any person who discovered an evil design against so elect a sister as Diana. If the present culprit desired to be set free from his grotesque position, he must humbly have recourse to her. Miss Vaughan was in America at the moment, but she generously came to his rescue as soon as steam could carry her, and restored him his lost front view by a jocose apposition of hands. I should add that on the very day when the misadventure took place at Paris, Miss Vaughan was defending her standpoint in person before the Triangle of Louisville. Opinion was divided about her, and the result appeared uncertain. When the demoniac tale of St. Mark, evacuating the minor devil who had hired it on a repairing lease, accepted Asmodeus as a tenant, and violently circumambulating the apartment, belabored all those whose voices had been raised against his vestal. Finally, the tassel of the tail turned into the head of the demon, and vowed his devotion to Diana, so long as she remained unmarried. Did she dare, however, to desert him for an earthly consort? He was commander of 14 legions. He would strangle the man of clay. It would be unkind to Miss Sophia Walter if I let it be supposed for a moment that the palm of prestige is borne away by her rival. I have already noted that this lady occasionally flutifies to the satisfaction of a select audience, but like the materializing medium, she finds it a depleting performance, which usually confines her to her room, and her price, therefore, is 5,000 francs. She is first sovereign in Bitru, and is defined by the doctor to be in a state of latent possession, having a semi-diabolical nature, and the gift of substitution. It was possibly at Milan that he witnessed the most persuasive test of her occult powers. She took him confidentially apart and explained to him that she had been in a condition of penetration for about 3 hours. At dinner, the food of which I partake becomes volatile in my mouth. Wine evaporates instantly. Wine evaporates invisibly the moment it makes contact with my lips. I eat and drink in appearance, but my teeth masticate the air. Now this was due not to the voracity of Bitru, but to the keen appetite of Baal-Zebub. You know, Baal-Zebub, not Baal-Zebub. You know, would be, Lord of the Flies instead of Master of Pus and that sort of thing. The magnetic lady did not, however, explain this point after the common method of speech. She fixed her blazing orbs upon the doctor, and he saw flames everywhere. A moment more, and her feet were free from earth. She stretched out her left hand, and on the open palm he beheld the successive apparitions in characters of flame with 10 letters, which constitute the great name. With a touch of internal collapse, he commended himself to the Virgin Mary. The ecstatic paroxysm the ecstatic paroxysm passed, and they wandered down another lane, for they were in the midst of leafy umbrage. Presently a tree gracefully arranged a portion of its branches in the form of a fan, and bowed with profound reverence. Still more fantastic, a paralyzed branch produced a living human head, which in the accompanying engraving is ornamented with an immaculate cuff, and that hand presented a bouquet to Sophia. By reason of these matters, the doctor became pensive. A Palladian seance followed. The litany of Lucifer was chanted, and the prodigy of substitution was effected. The ceremony took place in a grotto with a stalactite roof. Miss Walter produced from a basket the serpent, which was an inseparable companion of all her travels, immediately genuflected in front of her, swarmed the wall, and she assumed a pendant position attached to one of the stalactites. It was a reptile of no ordinary kind, for it began to develop an indeterminable length of coils until it spread itself circle-wise over the entire ceiling, and its head was joined to its tail. The doctor says that he was now prepared for anything. He was now prepared for anything. The serpent gave forth 7 horrible hisses, and in the dim light, for the torches which illuminated the place were successfully giving out of themselves, each person becoming conscious of an unseen entity blowing with burning breath in their faces. When at length there was complete darkness, Sophia herself became radiant and brilliantly illuminated the grotto with an intense white light. 5 enormous hands could then be seen floating in space, also intensely luminous, but emitting a green luster. Each hand went wandering in search of its prey, ultimately seizing a brother, whom it drew irresistibly forward in the direction of Sophia. Moved by a mysterious influence, 2 of them grasped her arms, 2 clutched her by the shoulders, 1 placed his hand on her head. The serpent again hissed 7 significant times, and in place of this solid Sophia, the 3rd Alexander of Macedon was substituted in a phantom guise. When he faded, Sophia reappeared and continued going and coming, with a phantom between each of her appearances, so that she was in turn replaced by Luther, Cleopatra, Robespierre, and others, concluding with the Italian patriot, Garibaldi, who eclipsed all others, for his bust was converted into a bronze urn, from which red flames burst forth. The flames took a human form and gave back Sophia to the assembly. Dante's Inferno, similarly, is less about divine judgment as it is about his own projections of what other, his something. Okay, maybe he had an experience, and they showed him. They showed him what he wanted to see. Oh yes, you're a good Catholic, and all these non-Catholics look at. Ooh, he betrayed Rome, and this. Betrayed the Italians. That's Such is the gift of substitution, which follows penetration, and such is the substance of the memoirs of M. Bataille, ship's doctor, who in the year 1880 undertook to exploit Freemasonry, and has come forth unsinged from diabolism. There is one maxim of the psalmist which the experience of the most transcendentalists has gone most transcendentalists has taught them to lay to heart and to repeat without qualifications of David when certain aspects of supernatural narrative are introduced. Omnis homo mendax. But lest I should appear to be discourteous, I should like to add a brief dictum from the Magus Alethis Levi. The wise man cannot lie, because nature accommodates herself to his statement. In a polite investigation like the present, there is therefore no question whether Dr. Bataille is defined by the term mendax, which is forbidden to literary elegance. It is simply a question whether he is a wise man or whether nature blundered and did not conform to his statement. The credibility, in whole or in part, of Dr. Bataille's narrative will involve some extended criticism, and I purpose to postpone it till the remaining witnesses have been examined. We shall then be in a position to appreciate how far later revelations support his statement, setting aside the miraculous element, which is tolerably separate from what most concerns our inquiry, namely the existence of Palladian masonry attached to the cultus of Lucifer. It may be stated that the most sober part of Dr. Bataille's memoirs is the account of his visit to Charleston. Here the miraculous element is entirely absent. He confirms by alleged personal investigations the existence of the new and reformed Palladium. He is the first witness who distinguishes clearly between the Luciferian order and the Supreme Council of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Charleston. Now, they're not using Luciferian is not so servile. It's like, oh, I've joined a cult. I got to do everything the cult says. It's like, yeah, they're experiencing their own light, but they're not terribly active about it. They're being dragged along. So I wouldn't really call that ancient accepted Scottish Rite of Charleston. That distinguish is made, however, at one expense. It assumes that the Supreme Council preserved the Baphomet idol, as well as the reputed skull of Molay, for nearly 70 years, and then surrendered it to another order with which it had no official acquaintance. Under what circumstances and why did it do that? The ancient and accepted Scottish Rite is connected by its legend with the Templars. As the Knights of Columbus are also connected with the Templar legend. And for the Charleston Supreme Council to part with the trophies of the tradition seems no less unlikely than for a regiment to surrender its colors. And, Diana Vaughn, we do find this aspect. The Ninth Gate wasn't kidding. Mumbo jumbo, and the guy's like, yes, these things can show the path, but sometimes Satan's dearest is the rebel that, while intelligent, while kind of serving the path, is saying, oh well, Satan, I don't want to do all this all the time, and maybe I just the secret is just these few things here. I'm going to do this few things here, and some people, the dear rebel, even to Satan himself, is sometimes treated as the dear one, but it's not a senseless either way. But as we see here, it's a slander against these other cultures. It's a big old xenophobia sort of expression of non-Catholics, people with different favoritism in countries. Oh, a hero for her own country. No, she should have went with Rome. Looks at Knox, Knox at looks.